straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt. Now I'm going to get straight into this morning. I just want to know straight off the bat. Tell me, did you win the Mayor's Award last week at the City to Surf?
The self-created category for the fastest mayor in the City to Surf. I'm claiming it.
That's the one I'm talking about.
That's the one.
Did you get it?
I'm claiming it, and I'm happy to have any other mayor out there in the nation, 537 across the nation, happy to have any other mayor take the title off me. I'm quite happy to give it away. I was actually a little bit disappointed in my time. I just haven't had enough time to train this year, and apparently it takes a bit of training to get through 14Ks.
Does it really?
At a decent rate.
Yeah.
So I did an hour 8 last year, which I thought was okay with limited training. And this year I thought, I've had even less time to train, but maybe just the excitement of the day will keep me to the same standard of last year, but didn't quite. Did an hour 10 this year.
Hour 10?
Yeah, so
disappointed.
A little bit down, but
obviously enough to win the Mayor's Prize.
By the entries received in that category that I've seen anyway, which amounts to approximately 1, then yes, absolutely. But again, there's mayors out there.
It's out there.
I know other mayors.
You've set out the challenge.
That's right. I know other mayors listen to this podcast, so I'm waiting for someone to say, no, here's my official time, so I can hand over the title and say congratulations.
I can't wait for a bloke like, say, Steve Monaghetti or someone, retired great athlete sort of thing, to suddenly turn around and say, challenge accepted. That'll make you push your training times.
I do want to say again, and I know last week we talked about saying that when people first downloaded this, it goes online about 10 a.m. Sunday morning. I would have just been finished the race by then, but I think I sort of be puffing and panting up Heartbreak Hill. But it is a well-organised event, so congratulations to the organisers. And I know what's involved in organising events, both from doing various charity events myself and also seeing on the council side when applications come through for things like the Dubbo Stampede, where you've just got to see the traffic closures, all the various things that go on behind the scenes. But even having that experience, I can't even imagine what the organisational project task list looks like for the City to Surf. Closing down streets in the centre of Sydney. I know the traffic process you go through to close down some streets in Dubbo on a Sunday for a Stampede event, but traffic in the middle of Sydney.
That's right. 50,000 people.
Well, 90 they were claiming.
90,000
they were claiming this year.
Wow.
So closing down those streets for number of hours. It's not a short little run, a number of hours. And then just the logistics. I love the drop off some things at the Hordern Pavilion, and then when you get to the finish line, it's all well laid out. You know exactly where to go to pick up your bag, and there's your stuff in your bag. And even the transport, the buses running out. You've got a lot of people to get away from Bondi Junction when you get there. And
it just seems seamless, doesn't it?
It does
it's just
seem
like
good.
Clockwork setup. One of the great things I do love about the City of the Surf, and I don't want to sit here and claim as if the fact I'm some elite athlete. I've only ever done it twice. Great fun times many years ago. But I do remember the fact that one of the things everybody seemed to do, and I picked up the first time, I didn't do it the first time, didn't have the gear for it, but second time I did, was where you buy an old jumper, or an old pair of tracksuit pants, that sort of stuff, and just for the race, you take it off and you throw it up a tree or you throw it off on the side somewhere. And, of course, what happens? The Salvos, Vinnies and these sort of guys come along afterwards, pick it all up, and it becomes part of the community donation.
Yeah, it's a good concept, because you do want to be a bit rugged up when you get there. It's early.
It's cold.
That's right. I think my start time was 7:35 from memory, and so you're turning up there, it's a bit chilly.
Yes.
And then what do I do with this jumper now? So that whole process of here's a way to donate, and it would be a huge number of articles of clothing donated, because you've got 90,000 people. Not all of them wear something there and throw it away, but it's a good concept. But even the atmosphere along the way, when you've got music playing and bands playing and different product endorsements along the side. Yeah. And there was one stage there I was running and I went past one particular band playing, and that gives you a bit of a rev up when you hear a bit of music. And I kept running past it, and then I could hear this band near me, or hear this music playing near me, and I thought, I don't remember running past another outlet, another music spot on the side of the road. And then next thing you know, this guy runs past me with a little boombox on his back. And I was both impressed and embarrassed, because I was impressed this guy was running along with his boombox. What a great idea, getting everyone along. But then he's gotten past me carrying the boombox on his back. So that was a bit embarrassing as well. But just little things like that, where you've got all these people on the side of the road doing things, and just the atmosphere and the carnival event, and everyone is friendly and happy. It's a really good event. And sometimes in Sydney, I find people are so rushed that they don't smile, they forget to say hello, they forget to just be polite sometimes. But on City to Surf Day, suddenly Sydney remembers that it's okay to be nice to
That's
people
right.
and just be welcoming, I think, as part of it. So
Well,
I was impressed.
Here's a good little chance too, of course, because if people want to experience that, they can do that, I'm assuming by the time this podcast comes out there, next week, of course, we've got the Dubbo Stampede.
Yeah, exactly right.
We
And
can
that
be
is
doing that ourselves.
That is a great event, and I've run the marathon with the Stampede. I've run the half marathon. I think I've run a 10K in the marathon, in the Stampede as well. So I've run a few of the different distances there.
Yeah.
And it is a well-organised event as well. So absolutely, that's an impressive event. I love the fact that you start in the zoo, finish in the zoo. That's fantastic as well. But even depending on the distance you do, you go around Truckarali for the half marathon and the marathon. So you're going around that great river walkway, cycleway, pathway we've got there. So that's fantastic, all part of that whole atmosphere there.
Yeah.
But again, that is an event where you do feel like the atmosphere is there and it's all fun and fantastic. The only difference is that it's probably only 3,000 people
As
compared
opposed
to
to
90,000.
90,000,
That's
that's
right.
right, yeah.
And I think at 3,000, they're getting pretty close to the capacity of what the zoo can handle, because the staging area there, City to Surf, you've got the beginning area of Hyde Park, so you've got a pretty big staging area, and then at the end you've got Bondi Beach.
That's right.
With the Stampede, you've obviously got areas of the zoo, and apparently they don't like people being in some of the lion enclosures and that type of thing
That's
for the start
understandable,
or the
especially
finish.
if they're a little bit hungry.
That's right. And so there's only so many areas you can have the staging, and only so many areas you can fit 3,000 people in there, and they stagger the start times and all the rest of it. So that's a really slick event. Started from the old Run for Fun, the old Rotary Club used to do, combined Rotary Clubs actually used to do Run for Fun. I think it was between the South and the West clubs used to do the Run
That's
for
going back a
Fun.
few years ago, but you're right. Yeah.
It is going back. I remember at school doing that,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember being in Rotary, being in South Rotary, being on the organising committee for that. So that started from that. And when it got almost too big for Rotary, the committee of the Stampede, which changes each year, they took over and have made it a much bigger and better event. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I know that both you and I will be there next Sunday as well, racing around and doing a level best.
Yeah, indeed.
Now, Matt, you have had a very busy week. Sydney, Canberra, and you also managed to turn around and get a little bit of a time in there down in Adelaide as well, which we'll get to later on in the program today. But let's start off with Canberra. We've talked about Sydney. You went down there for obviously the run, but then from there you flew off to Canberra.
Well, I did come back in between. I did make it back
You
to
managed to
Dubbo.
come back, did you?
That's
Oh,
right, yeah.
That's
I came
impressive. Well done.
Came back to Dubbo on Monday.
Right, okay.
And then down to Canberra on Tuesday afternoon. That's right, yeah, last
So
thing Tuesday afternoon.
what was the attraction for Canberra?
Well, lots of things are attractive in Canberra, but we have Regional Capitals Australia, which, as you know, we are a member of, and technically I'm the secretary of the organisation, but more the fact that Dubbo's a member of it. And we did drop out of that membership for a few years, but we're back in that membership now. I think it's important. And about every quarter, we go down to Canberra and take a delegation down and meet with various politicians, various staffers there, for two reasons. One, to push the message of Regional Capitals Australia. And just to give you a snapshot, regional capitals, what we do with that is we take places like Dubbo, other places you might be familiar with around New South Wales, for example. So you might take a Wagga or a Tamworth or a Orange, those type of cities that we've got, and combine those with various capitals from around the nation, so various of those regional capitals. And then we go as a group to Canberra and we say the population of these regional capitals is about the same in round numbers as Sydney. But we don't think we get the same attention as Sydney. Then we look at the service population, and we think the service population of those regional capitals around the nation is probably close to 9 million people. Because again, you think about Dubbo, 57,218 people, but the service population of Dubbo is about 200,000.
Yeah, right.
And it's the same with many regional capitals, many regional cities around the nation, that they've got the city itself. They've got one population for that LGA, but then they're servicing a much larger region. So by our approximate numbers, we're about the equivalent of 9 million people. That's about, say, Sydney and Melbourne together. Again, we don't feel like we get enough money spent on the areas. And so the first thing we do is we talk to pollies, advisors, and we say, here we are. Here's what we represent. Here are the things that are important to us. So that's step one, awareness, making sure they're aware that we exist. Step two is we'll give you some of our policy positions, some of the areas that we think that we would really like to see some direct action, but also we want to hear from you in terms of how we're going, how are things progressing with our policy areas, things that are important to us, how can we do things better in terms of whether it might be policy decisions, it might be funding decisions, what can we do to basically work on that. And the other thing we like to do is we like to push the idea that we are a good sounding board. So if you're a government or if you're an opposition, if you're thinking about policies that might impact regional locations, well, it's pretty hard to go and have a discussion with, say, 50 different council areas, 50 different mayors, 50 different general managers. But if you talk to Regional Capitals Australia, you get a pretty good snapshot of what those various locations think and just some idea whether things that you're thinking of might make sense or not. One of the bits of feedback, in this one we probably focus more on opposition this time rather than government. So normally it's meeting with ministers, which you've heard me talk about it before, different ministers we've met with and had really good discussions and I think some good outcomes as well. But this one, with election coming up, you just want to make sure you're talking to all people in politics. And two things with this. One is, sure, opposition one day, might be government the next. But the second thing is you can sometimes help a bit of pressure be put on a government, making sure the opposition know some of the positions that you hold on things. So it is still important to talk to all politics.
Well, I think one of the classics, you met up with Darren Chester. Now, Darren he's one of the shadow ministers there, and is he a shadow minister for regional development? Is that one of his roles?
Yeah, so he's got a couple of roles: shadow minister for regional education, shadow minister for regional development, shadow minister for local government and territory. Right. So pretty relevant from our perspective to meet with him for some of those portfolios, definitely.
Was he pretty keen to hear your ideas?
Absolutely, and Darren is, I think, someone that understands regional, and presumably why he's got some of those portfolios, understands regional. Well, there's a few things I think that we got out of the conversation with Darren, for example. One of the things was cost of living pressure. He talked about the fact that you walk the halls of Parliament House. He said, if you haven't got a proposal that's trying to address cost of living pressures, then it's probably not going to be listened to by the government. And we do. We have a proposal that addresses that because we think capitals, regional locations can give people better ways of living because it's cheaper to live in regional locations rather than a capital city. So move people out of Sydney or out of Melbourne or out of Perth to some of those regional locations. We think you'll get better outcomes from a government perspective and certainly for those locations.
Definitely the cost of living pressures happening out here too, aren't there, as well?
They are, but one of the things that certainly we hear feedback on cost of living is it does directly link to median house price. When you've got a median house price in Sydney, say, of $1.117 million, then when a 1 or 0.1% increase in interest rates goes up, that has an impact that's a larger dollar amount than when the median house price might be $562,000. So certainly cost of living pressure is everywhere, but it does seem to be felt more acutely in the areas that have dearer housing. So that's good for regional areas. We have cheaper housing, so we can help address some of these cost of living pressures, we think. So that was one. It also came down to essential employment, and Darren talked about getting essential employees and what we might do, whether it might be immigration, whether it might be making sure we've got good marketing programs for capital cities, but certainly with immigration and just getting some of those jobs filled. Darren talked a lot about childcare, having enough childcare places to keep employment in a community, which is important without a doubt. But we also gave Darren some feedback to say it's not just childcare, it's all employees. All these regional locations have got shortages in employees. Most of these locations have employment rates that are about 1% lower, or better if you like, than the national average. But that means that most employers are screaming out for more people. So even though Darren had a focus on childcare, then we said, yes, that is a problem, but there are other industries that have a problem as well.
I'm glad you picked up on that because I'm a bit with you. I think that, look, obviously within certain locations, and I'm sure, probably here in Dubbo as well, the childcare is a very high priority need for a lot of families in regards to it. But I'm sure there must be a broader level of discussion that should be taking place rather than just simply around childcare. It
is difficult. Presumably some data they have, some people have had discussions around childcare, so that's a focus at the moment. But certainly what I hear is it doesn't matter what the occupation is, whether it's a barista, an accountant, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, it's every occupation. And people will feel it's more one occupation than another if it impacts them. So if you've got kids at school and the school is saying we don't have enough teachers to take on more classes, you feel it more acutely with lack of school teachers. If you're needing medical appointments and you can't get in to see a doctor for a length of time, then you think the greatest shortage is the shortage in doctors. So people are it's hard to look big picture. It's something I've always found in my time on council that I have to make sure I do it, but also when you talk to people, just getting people to understand, taking one step back and looking at a big picture, because people see things through their eyes. That makes sense. So their lens is the way they understand things. So looking at it through another lens or a bigger lens is often a real challenge. When we do talk to employers, though, when I try and talk to different employers, it's trying to find out how that's impacting the overall economy. Childcare definitely impacts, but for some people, they don't have young kids, they don't need childcare, so it's people at a certain stage of life. So we chatted to certainly Darren. That was a good conversation.
You saw Ted O'Brien? Who's Ted O'Brien?
Well, we didn't see Ted. The other ones we met with were more the advisors, and sometimes the advisors can be more important than the actual members of parliament, because they're trying to take in so many conversations, but if you can convince the advisor, they've got more time. We might only spend an hour.
Like I'd suggest one of the advisors, a very strong advisor there, is coming into Darren Chester's ear in regards to childcare.
Possibly, that's right.
That certainly seems to be the case.
But when you think about it, we might meet with these pollies for an hour, but they're advisors with them all day. So if we can get to the stage where we can convince an advisor. So sometimes I know when we meet with these various groups and they say, the
this
minister...
is Politics 101, folks.
Well,
it is how it's done, isn't it? Like, it really is.
When they say the minister or the member of parliament can't meet with you, some of the members of regional cities or regional capitals go, that's a bit frustrating. And I go, no, well, if we can get to the right advisor, get to the right person, then that mightn't be so bad. So
Wasn't there a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People? I'm pretty sure there was a Stephen Covey book about one as well.
I don't remember him saying meet with the advisors, but
that's pretty much that sort of idea, isn't it? But the importance of how that whole process works is that meeting with the right people to get the best outcome. Yeah,
that's right. Meet with the decision makers, which you think, okay, well, that's the poly, but the poly they can't know everything, so they need to take their advice from somewhere. Yes. So we met with Ted O'Brien's office, a couple of young gentlemen there from Ted's office. He's the Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Now, that's an interesting one, because we're in a res. Now, again,
what is the current position of the Liberal Party in regards to that?
Well, that was one of the crucial questions we asked. And I've got to be careful when I meet with an RCA hat on or an RCNSW hat on. I've got to be careful that I don't just focus on Dubbo. Yeah. But if you focus on needs across the board, Dubbo is certainly featured in there. But sometimes, and this is one of those examples, they'll say, okay, Matt, this is exactly in your area. You know this stuff. Can you lead the discussion, if you like, with Ted O'Brien's office, because you've got a res, you know more about this than the rest of the regional capital members. So let's have that discussion. So I did, and I said, it's interesting because we understand a little bit about your policy around nuclear, but we've got a res that's happening. We think it's great for our area. We've got lots of money coming along. What is your official policy around renewables and around nuclear?
Absolutely.
And of course, they talked about the fact that the opposition, the Labor Party, they're not the opposition, the government, sorry, not the opposition, the opponents to them, playing down this whole area with renewables, but they said renewables, in their mind, in their energy mix, are still an important part of the whole process. Nuclear will be taking over the big chunk in terms of replacing coal-fired power, but renewables can still feed and be a part of that whole picture.
I'm going to put my cynical hat in here and say 35 years down the track, maybe.
Well, I didn't start a fight with them.
That's in regards to CSIRO, by the way. That's just my personal opinion. That's backed up with facts. But anyway, sorry, just to put my position on that one.
Well, I've always have lots of things bouncing around the back of my head when I'm having these discussions, but I'm also trying to win friends and influence people, so I'm trying not to start a fight with them.
You can't turn around and start a fight like with me in the back, you'd be holding me back sort of thing, you know. Mark, shut up.
But at least they're acknowledging the fact that renewables can be part of their solution, so that's good for us. We don't want them to get into government and then say, shut down all those reses across the nation, they all stop, because from our perspective, we want this investment to continue in our area, whatever form that looks like. So that was interesting. We also met with Peter Dutton's office, so opposition leader. So we met with a young lady there. And
so
again,
what was the focus there with that? What was the chat?
It was really just about general coalition policy rather than anything specific from Peter Dutton's office. So there was.
Did you get anything back from them in regards to that?
Well, it's probably more in that session. It was a senior advisor we met with. It was probably more a one way. It was really, here are our policies. Do you know much about us? Do you understand some of the things that are happening? And so it was really a bit of a download from us to this advisor. We hadn't met with her before, so this was, it changed with each meeting depending on how familiar they are with the group, how familiar they are with various cities around the nation. In this particular one, it really was, okay, I don't know much about you. Can you tell us all about this group? So she sat there and took lots of notes and wrote lots of things down, so that's good. Nothing definitive out of that particular meeting, but who knows? In 6 months' time, maybe 9 months' time, Peter Dutton could be the Prime Minister.
That's right. Absolutely.
So I'm sure that this young lady will still have a job with Peter at that point in time. So having those conversations now is laying that groundwork.
So it was more of a relationship building sort of exercise, or
an information download and building that relationship, definitely, without a doubt. And we also met with a lady who's the Chief of Staff to the Honourable Paul Fletcher. Now, I did actually mention to her that I remember meeting with Paul back, and I'm going from memory here, so it was probably around 2014.
Yep.
Paul would have had the position of the Parliamentary Secretary to the Communications Minister. So we were doing things with the NBN back around those times, back when I was Mayor, back in Dubbo City Council days. And Paul, I found, was fantastic to deal with. He was on the ball, knew what he was talking about. And we used to get into the Communications Minister rarely, because at that time I think it might have been Malcolm Turnbull. But getting into Paul was much easier to see Paul, so that was good. And he was also at one point in time there the Minister for Local Government even, or maybe Assistant Minister for Local Government, but he certainly was involved with local government. So we had a bit to do with Paul back in those days. He's now the Shadow Minister for Science, Arts, Government Services and the Digital Economy. And again, it was really just an update to see where they sit, a bit of advice around some different policies, sometimes even ways to approach what the government's doing, because the opposition's there sitting there saying, well, they should be doing this better. It sometimes helps the argument if they've got more information from a group like ours. So overall, productive day, only short, flew down there Tuesday night, came back Wednesday night.
Yeah,
of course, we had council meeting Thursday.
Yep.
But it's one of those things that I think it's worth being there, worth sitting at the table, having these discussions. And you also feel like you're doing it on behalf of all regional capitals. Not every regional capital can get to all of these meetings, but you feel like you are helping just not represent Dubbo, but helping represent all those regional capitals. And I still see it as a win. When we see good outcomes from any regional capital, it's a good outcome for all of us, because at least governments of the day are recognising that we exist.
Absolutely.
So I'm not that concerned if another city, another capital city gets something that maybe we would have liked to have received, for example. Yes, you want as much as you can for yourself, but you also feel like we all win when one of us wins out of that whole group.
Yeah, nice. Now, you mentioned the fact that you flew back from Canberra to come back into Dubbo here for the council meeting. Now, was this, first stop and foremost, was this the last one? Was this the last time council got together as a group? The current
Almost,
council?
kind of. Possibly.
Okay, so it wasn't quite the grand final.
It was meant to be. So this was the 35th council meeting of this term. That's council meetings and extraordinary meetings, not committee meetings, not standing committee meetings, etc.
Yep.
So 35th council meeting. Now, that was meant to be the last, because it was on the 15th of August. Councils across the state went into caretaker mode on the 16th of August, so it made sense to have that final meeting where you're still a normal functioning council and make all the decisions you might need to make. One of the things, though, that we resolved at the council meeting was to have another council meeting. We just love them so much.
Have a meeting.
Almost. We love them so much.
It's like one of those Faulty Towers episodes.
We're going to miss each other so much.
That's exactly right. We can't just go just yet.
No.
But wait, there's more.
So we resolved on the 5th to have another meeting, an extraordinary meeting on the 5th of September.
Right.
And this is to refer our financial statements to the auditor. You have to do them before a certain date. And in an ideal world, sure, they might have been ready by the 15th of August, but that's a pretty tight time frame given the fact that the financial year and only just finished a month and a half beforehand. So we're going to refer those to the auditor on the 5th of September. But it also gave us an opportunity for that meeting to have 3 DAs that need to be considered by council to be considered at that meeting. Now, the first question I know you're going to say is, hold on, caretaker mode. Can you make decisions?
Well, that's right. Because
mode.
Once you move into that space, is that something you can do, or?
Well, there are provisions in caretaker mode, and for those interested, those that read along at home, Section 393B of the Local Government Act is where you'll go to read more about caretaker mode. But in essence, as I mentioned, on the 16th of August, we moved into caretaker mode. Caretaker mode goes from there until the election day on the 14th of September.
Yeah.
In caretaker mode, there's a few things you can't do according to the Local Government Act. One thing is approve a controversial DA. Right. Now, what's controversial, you say?
I was going to say there's definition of that type of stuff, I'm sure.
If it was affecting you, then it's definitely controversial because people are focused on what they see through their eyes.
Yeah.
But a controversial DA is defined as a DA that has more than 25 submissions.
Right, okay.
So if it hasn't got more than 25 submissions, considering a DA at council...
Opposing the DA or...
Whatever it might be, considering the DA.
Okay.
So whether... Because you don't know what's going to happen at a council meeting. You could approve that DA, you could reject that DA, you could do whatever councils do with the DA. So In caretaker mode, you can still consider DAs, but just not DAs that have got more than 25
So obviously
submissions.
these 3 that you have to look towards approving don't have more than 25.
Correct.
What do we call it? How'd you refer to it as?
Submissions.
Submissions or...
Controversial.
Controversial, that's it, yes.
That's right. And the reason you'd say let's do those rather than wait until, say, for example, a new council and comes along with a new meeting is developers spend money waiting on things to happen. So when you're not processing a DA, when you're saying, oh, we'll just hold off till you get a new council, well, it's probably the end of October before your next full meeting of council. So you're saying, hold on, it's the middle of August, and you mean I've got to wait till the end of October to have that considered by council, and I still don't know the outcome until it goes through that consideration process. Wow, that's terrible. Now, you've also got this little minor thing called deemed refusal.
Right.
And if we spend too long to either approve or reject a DA, it's deemed to be refused.
Oh, right. Well, that's rather interesting.
It is interesting. And one thing that some developers would do, not with us because we've talked about our league table and how good we are on our league table, but one thing that a developer might do is they might wait until the day ticks over for deemed refusal and then bang, straight away they say, you deemed refuse that, I'll take that straight to the Land Environment Court. Now, there's been no threat of anything like that in this case, but we think it's fair to a developer. We've got the DA basically all done, ready to go, couldn't quite make it to this council meeting, but gee, end of October, that seems like a long time. So 5th of September, that seems like it's fairer for all. Now, a couple of things you can't do, basically back to the caretaker mode, sorry.
Right.
You can't adopt or amend a policy that's not urgent or necessary for normal business. So we can't suddenly say, actually, you know what, we'd like to have a policy that changes the expenses for councillors because all of us are now retiring. We want to make it really difficult for the next group of councillors and have no expenses available for councillors. Let's go and do that now at the end of our council term in caretaker mode. No, you can't do that, sorry, because it's not really necessary for normal operation of business. And you also can't enter into contracts that would bind the next council. Now, one of the ways that can be interpreted is you can't go and sack the GM and hire a new GM because that's a contract that just binds the new council.
Yeah.
Now, you could do it a week ago, that's fine. But in caretaker mode, again, in that very last throes of council, if you like, then you can't do things like that. Now, that also typically would extend to tenders. That's binding a new council to a tender process, whatever it might be, purchase of new equipment, awarding some sort of service contract. So if you do that in caretaker, to me, you wouldn't touch a tender during caretaker mode. So there's a few things you can't do, and you can still do those if you have to. If there's an absolute necessity around something that's happened, and you absolutely have to do it. But in general, we'll have that almost last council meeting. On last Thursday, but then we'll have another one there. And a couple of things I went through when we did that last council meeting, I just grabbed a couple of stats that I thought were quite interesting. 2 councillors have made it to every single one of those 35
Is that
meetings.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's tough because you've got lives.
There's lots of reasons why people can't make it for certain reasons, I'm sure.
So 3 councillors only missed one. I actually think we had really good attendance from our councillors this term. So 3 councillors only missed one of those 35.
Impressive.
There were 2, myself was one, and that kind of makes sense because I feel a huge responsibility chairing the meeting, running the meeting to actually be at every council meeting. And so my life revolves around those council meeting dates. And the deputy mayor made it to every single council meeting as well.
Well done, because I know there's been many occasions you've had to sort of travel back from weird and wonderful locations around the place. I remember one occasion when I think you're on a bike somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and managed to get back in.
Well, the deputy mayor did mention that to me afterwards. I said, well done on making it to every council meeting. He said, well, thank you. He didn't actually realise that he'd made it to every single one.
Yeah, right.
He said, but I'm not quite as impressed as you. And he mentioned there's 2 examples. One where I had a friend come out and pick me up from Cobar while I was on tour at O'Rock, fly me back in, literally fly in a plane back in to make the council meeting, and then my wife drove me back out afterwards. And then the other one was in Orana, again, doing a charity event, and had someone from the Orana Council drive me back in. Went to the council meeting and then drove back out.
Went back and ride back some sort of ridiculous hour of the morning. Remember that? Yes, that's it.
The other one I thought was interesting was notices of motion. Now, I don't want to carry on about this one too much because it's not what being a councillor is all about. There's a whole range of duties, if you're a good councillor, things that you contribute and the ways you contribute. But it is interesting when you talk about notices of motion. And there were 2 councillors who had the equal highest number of notices of motion successful notices of motion they brought to council, and that was Councillor Shibley Chowdhury and again Councillor Richard Ivey. So they both had 11 successful notices of motion they brought to council. we had a lot of notice of motion brought to council by councillors, which again shows an active group, but it's not the only way you would measure them, but I just thought that was an interesting little stat as well.
Yeah, well thought of, obviously, from the point of view of what they wanted to say and what they want to bring forward as well. So good job.
Yeah, that's right. So the 30th meeting, we'll have one more, 36 on the 5th of September, and then that will definitely...
That is it then?
Probably be the last one for the September Council.
Probably. Now, there's been a fair bit of discussion, Matt. We talked about this last week with Rex. So Regional Express have gone into voluntary administration, was announced during the week. A couple of quick things in regards to this. How has this affected council, first and foremost? And let's go into the finance of this. Have we lost any money by that being announced during the week?
Well, they were announced before this week. They went into voluntary administration.
But
we took it to the council because the financial figure we thought was fair to talk to the community about. And so have we lost money? Not yet, but yes, we will, because I've never seen a voluntary administration process where everyone gets paid 100%. So the scary number here is $658,539 and 70 cents. Let's call it $650 or $659 to be more accurate. Let's call it $659,000.
So if they still continue on with operating, do they have any responsibility to pay that money back?
Well, the administrators have sent us notification to say, as of this date, whichever the exact date of the administration started, then we, the administrators, are responsible, personally liable for these debts. The directors of Ernst & Young or the administrators of Ernst & Young doing that work are responsible. So your debts going forward are pretty well guaranteed. But the debt in the past, we're just an unsecured creditor. Now, the approximate amount that I've heard figures, and these aren't official figures that we've received through council, but I've heard figures in the vicinity of $500 million to $600 million owed by Rex to various creditors. Now, we're one of those. We haven't got any security over that money. When they wash up administration processes, which they typically do, you often hear about figures of 5 cents in the dollar, or let's call it 5%, 10%. So of that $659,000, maybe we'll get back 10%, maybe not even that.
So Rex can turn around, and let's say it's a figure of $600 million, just for argument's sake. Let's put it out there. Let's say $600 million. Rex has gone into voluntary administration. They can turn around and say, the administrators now can say, all right, we'll pay back 5% of that figure to all the groups. You'll get a maximum 5%, whatever you're owed, like we're owed $686,000 here. We might get 5% back maybe out of this. But once all that's been paid and done, Rex as a company can then go, well, we've paid our debts, 5%, but we can still keep operating.
Well, you're talking about now accounting, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on accounting, but
can the company continue to operate after that?
The administration process, they can say that they will trade out of administration. That is an option for them. And again, I don't want to be giving accounting advice here. It's a complicated process. But basically, a line's drawn in the sand. And the administrator's job is, first of all, to say, okay, how much money is owed and what do we have? Okay, there's $600 million owed. Oh, there's a bank account with $600 million in it. Oh, good. That's fine. We can pay that. But you don't normally go and put yourself in voluntary administration when you've got enough money to pay your debts, because obviously one of the crucial things is, as a director of a company, and this is whatever size company, public company like Rex or a private mum and dad company that's set up as a company, you need to be able to say that we can pay our debts when and if they are due. And if you don't do that, then you're trading insolvent and you've got some pretty significant legal ramifications. So as a director of Rex, again, this will be all investigated during the process, presumably they could, up to a point in time, say that we were trading solvent, and then, we're at risk now of trading insolvent. We've got two options. One, keep trading insolvent and risk the legal ramifications of that, risk the penalties, or put our hand up and say, we're going to declare we're going into voluntary administration, and then that basically stops any legal implications for those directors, and then they can go forward, unless they were knowingly trading for a length of time insolvent. That's, again, a whole range of tricky areas that we're talking about here. But from that line in the sand, that's when the administrators say, from today, we're trading and we're going to make sure all those bills are paid and everything's done correctly. And then they've got a few options. They can try and sell that business. They can try and trade out of that business. They can decide that there's no future for this business and shut it all down.
The administrators can?
The administrators can basically go through this process, because at the moment, once administrators take over, they're running the business effectively, not the directors of Rex running the business. So they can make these various decisions. But the important part is, from our perspective, we're still charging them passenger fees for when planes take off.
But the federal government has now assured those seats, haven't they?
Now, that's a separate issue. So this is a separate issue again. One of the things in the past, if you'd bought a ticket before it went into administration and said, I've got my ticket here, I'm ready to fly to some location, and then it went into administration, often people will just, that's it, they've lost their money. And you see that happen in various organisations that go into administration that, sorry, I know you paid your money and that was supposedly going to deliver you a house or a plane ticket or whatever it might have been. Sorry, you're not getting that anymore, or you might get back a smaller part of that. So those tickets were basically probably going to be worthless to people in the future, depending on exactly how it all played out. Now, Virgin, Qantas, both came in and said, if you've got a ticket on one of these routes that's being shut down, we'll honour that ticket for Rex and not charge you for it.
Right.
Great PR exercise. They had no compulsory process to do that, and Rex certainly are not paying them, as far as I know, for doing that. But that was a PR exercise to say, hey, this other company shut down those capital city routes. We'll cover your ticket, sir, because we're a good corporate citizen. So a good PR exercise from those, but also nice for those people that have booked tickets. But people that have booked tickets on Rex in the regional routes that are still flying, so Dubbo to Sydney, for example, as far as I know, those tickets are still valid. If they bought a ticket the day before and went into administration and the flight was 2 days after, as far as I know, that ticket was still valid. But the big thing here, the big thing that the federal government made an announcement about was, and this came out of an email that was sent to myself and other mayors around the nation from the Honourable Christian McBain, who's the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories, and it was basically an update on Rex Airlines. Now, this was a huge concern from the administrators, which administrators had expressed to us, local government. They'd also obviously expressed it to the state government. We spoke to Chris Minns a week ago, and he'd said he'd had conversations with, or the government had conversations with the administrators, and the federal government as well. The big concern was, I'm about to go for a flight. Do I buy a ticket on Rex or the other airline that might be servicing me, whether that be Virgin or Qantas or Link Airways, whatever else, what other company? And in my mind, booking a ticket, I might have said, well, if I buy it on Rex and I'm going to fly in a week's time, well, I know they're already in voluntary administration. Is my ticket money just going to be ripped up and thrown away? I'll go the other airline. And the anecdotal information we had, it was too early to get any real data. We had data or information that said there were 2 and 3 people on Rex flights, and the alternative flight in different locations was chock-a-block full. So people had started going, not flying with Rex. Again, they're concerned over the ticket,
ship, so to speak.
And the administrator said, while people are doing that, our hopes of selling the business, trading through the business are terrible because we've got no one on these flights. So they were almost making a plea, can you encourage people? So the federal government has come out and they've said that, and again, these are, I'll quote from some parts of this email that's sent to me from Christie, the Albanese government has announced it will guarantee regional flight bookings for Rex customers throughout the voluntary administration process. Travellers can continue to book regional flights on Rex during this process with certainty that they will either fly or get their money back. Now, the important part about that is, sure, I'll book a ticket and I'll fly and hopefully I'll fly. And you don't want to have that service cancelled, that ticket cancelled. They're not saying it will be cancelled, but just if everything goes pear-shaped and the whole thing falls over, the federal government will guarantee you'll get your money back. And so that supposedly will give people more confidence. This is hot off the press. This only came to me a couple of days ago.
So Rex right now is still flying the same number of flights per week out of Dubbo?
Dubbo, yes, sorry. Yep. I should let you finish the sentence.
No, that's all right. So out of Dubbo right now, so if you want to book a flight with Rex, the same amount of flights are still flying out of Dubbo per week.
So you could do that. You can fly on those. They've shut down the capital city operations, the Melbourne, Sydney, those type of operations.
Yep.
But the regional, I think there was one place, I think Whyalla was one place that I heard of where they had cut out some of those regional flights. But in general, regional flights, their regional routes, their Saab 340B planes are still flying.
Okay.
And on this information that came from Christie, it talked about the fact that Rex has 41 routes to regional and remote communities, including 21 routes that are only serviced by Rex. Now think about that. In Dubbo, we've got great services with Qantas and Rex. We know we almost hit 200,000 passengers last year, so we've got good services. Rex flew maybe 60,000 of those. So if Rex fell over tomorrow, then you might have Qantas picking up the gap there. You might have other airlines that want to fill in that gap there. But imagine if you were an airport that only had Rex, and Parks is one that comes to mind nearby, but there's 21 of those. If Parks lost Rex tomorrow, one of the things that I saw, I'm not an expert on this, but one of the things I saw externally was that Rex seemed to be good at delivering a service into areas that were low passenger numbers. Other airlines would say, not enough passengers numbers there for me to make money. I'm not going to go there. Rex said, we've got a low cost base. We've got older planes that are been around. We own them now. They're cheaper from our cost base. We've got younger pilots. We probably don't pay them as much as some of the larger airlines. So we can run services when there's not as many passengers to a port where other airlines would balk at that or say it's just not worth it for us. Those 21 are the ones that are the big concern for government in general, not so much for Dubbo, but for government in general.
Well, it certainly seems to in this case too that Rex have a few places over a barrel, to be honest. If you're taking, let's take the same sort of context. If you've been caught out by, let's say, a builder, your house has gone down because the builder's gone insolvent, and you've lost out $500,000 from it. You might get back 5%, so you might get $25,000 back from it. Most people in that situation don't then go back if that builder then comes up and says, hey, listen, we've managed to give you 5% back, but we're still running as a company. You want to come back to us again? Most people turn around and say, you know what you can do. We'll go to someone else. But in this situation, we've got a scenario whereby this same company, which is turning around saying, well, I'll give you 5% of this $686,000 back. But hey, we'll still keep flying out of Dubbo for you because we're a good brand. Does that sit well with council in regards to that? Because I suppose, do we have other options here, I suppose, and what I'm getting to? Is Virgin an option possibly?
Well, everything's an option. Go back one step, though. The $659,000 that's owed is something that is now in the hands of the administrator. There's not much we can like it, we can not like it, we can get angry, we can get frustrated, but the bottom line is the administrators will go through and they'll do their job and we'll get whatever we get. Now, I know you're saying 5%. We don't know what it might be. It might be 1%. It might be they might find some rock with a lot of money hidden underneath it and they might give us back a lot more than that, but we just don't know. That's part of the administration process. And then you're right, I've seen other companies where they've declared themselves to be or go into voluntary administration and then they've paid all those past debts at a certain amount and they've said, we'll trade through it. So it's the same person. So and I'm talking about smaller companies now. So you've got a building company, say, Mark Barnes Building, and then you decide, no, it's not working out. Sorry, I can't pay all those bills, but I'm going to trade through this. So you basically wipe your slate clean and then you continue to trade forward. So there's not a huge penalty there for you not running your business properly. This is a great frustration, and you've heard the term phoenixing, where people phoenix a company. Now, the Australian government has put rules in place to try and prevent phoenixing. I'm not suggesting here that Rex are trying to do a phoenix process, but it is tough when you see a plane that's been landing, that Rex has been collecting money from those passengers, and they take as long as possible. Rex have got a reputation around the nation for taking as long as possible to pay, despite being hassled, despite phone calls, all the rest of it. They drag it out to 90 days every single time.
And then get to this situation now,
which
is always the fear.
That's right, when you see those companies that take a long time to pay. So you have all that as a background, and then going forward, well, the administrator said they'll keep paying. Well, that's great. But then on the other side of all this is we want these services for our community. So we want regional airlines.
This is where we're caught between a rock and a hard place in this one, I'd suggest.
We are, and I suspect that if Rex end up closing down completely, there would be another airline that would service Dubbo in addition to QantasLink. Now, QantasLink do a great job. But I think another airline would come along because it's too lucrative a market. We've had threats from Rex over the years to pull out of Dubbo if you put our passenger fees up or if you put security screening in or whatever it might be. They do tend to be a bit of a bull at a gate in media releases when they don't have things going their way, which is we've seen happen across the nation in the past.
So sorry to interrupt you there, Matt. Is there any other company right now, though, that is maybe looking at this and seeing this as the opportune time to step in and to come to council and go, hey, listen, we've been waiting in the wings to have a crack at Dubbo for a long time. Listen, I know what's happened here with Rex. We're ready to rock and roll. We've got the fleet. We've got the pilots. What's stopping us from getting in here now?
Well, there's still one major problem for getting in here. And I've sent off some letters to various airlines to say, just remember we're here. I've met with some of these airlines. Virgin, I met with Virgin way back probably 10 years ago was the first meeting I had with Virgin. So we have these ongoing discussions with various airlines, and this opportunity I have taken to send some official letters from the Mayor to say nothing about Rex, just to say, remember Dubbo's here. Now, they would obviously all read between the lines and go, okay, well, Rex is servicing Dubbo. But there's still the problem, which is the slots in Sydney.
Yeah, I was going to say probably the slots.
Yeah. So at the moment...
Is there changes happening with that, though? Are they talking about this?
Certainly Catherine King has made an announcement to say they're doing a full review of the slots. But as it stands right now today, Rex, who are continuing to fly, the slots they had before, they've still got... So if another airline came along and said, we're ready to start flying to Sydney for you, we reckon we can fix up that problem. And who cares about Rex then?
So they're obviously paying for those slot times. They're not letting them go.
Well, you don't pay for the slot time.
You don't.
You pay for the passengers.
Right.
So when they land a plane at Sydney Airport with 3 passengers on it, then they'll pay, or it's more the takeoff when they take off. So you're paying per passenger. So when they're not having many people on those planes, Sydney Airport, who is a privately owned organisation, is saying, we would rather planes that have got more people on them. But again, the way the slot management works... So
they don't come for a renewal every 12 months or anything like that?
It seems like once you've got a slot, whenever you're using it...
It's like a member's ticket at the MCG or something.
It is.
You've got it for life. That's it.
That's right, yeah. So this is the tricky part. So any other airline that talks to us, we say, yes, come along. We've got a great airport. We've got lots of people that want to fly. Fantastic.
Yep.
But your slots, that's a bit of a problem. You've got to work out your slots. Because that was one of the issues for Virgin many years ago. We were talking to Virgin specifically about Melbourne and Brisbane. Great opportunity there. You should be doing that. They looked at it. They chatted to us. They actually came and visited us here in Dubbo, looked at a whole range of things. They said, we would love to be here, and how do we get some of those slots? And I actually went and met with the slots master in Sydney. I don't know what his official title is, but I call him the slot master.
Sounds like a few poker machines on the side there or something. The slot master, here he is.
And so he explained it to me in great detail, way more detail than I needed. But essentially it was use it, and you don't lose it. So if you stop using it, then you'll lose it. But, of course, Rex was never going to walk away from those slots. No. So that's still the tricky part. It's a complicated area and made more complicated by the fact that lots of people want to go into Sydney and they want to go at certain times of the day, and that's when obviously you've got that hitting up that limit against the number of actual movements.
It's a fascinating discussion, and it sounds like there's so much more to get through in regards to it as well.
So the bottom line is here, the $659,000 we're owed will probably not all be paid. Can't tell you how much, but probably not all be paid when the administration is finally washed out of that whole process. And that means that we'll probably have to take some money from the general revenue of council to fill that little hole in our budget there. And that's one of the whole things we try and do with our businesses, whether it be sale yards or whether it be airports. We're trying to make sure they run at least paying for themselves, hopefully putting some money back into the economy. But we don't want to take them from ratepayers, and we had to cover the cost of the airport during COVID when obviously numbers dropped dramatically. Here's another one that's going to be a bit of a hit to the bottom line for the airport as well.
Sounds like, doesn't it?
Makes it tough.
All right, on something far more positive. During the council meeting, there was a discussion there about the development application for the residential subdivision, which is more commonly known as the North West Precinct. So, first development coming through. Are we looking at something happening here pretty quickly, or what's the situation with our Northwest development there?
Well, this is incredibly exciting. This term of council started with discussions around the Northwest Precinct, and we encouraged and actually resolved for our CEO to accelerate the process here. We know we need more housing. The nation needs more housing. If we can be part of the solution, fantastic. This federal government has said 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. If you broke that down per LGA, which is not right because obviously different size LGAs, but just break that down across 537 LGAs, that's 450 new homes per year for the next 5 years. And we think we'll probably carry a higher burden than the rest of the nation in terms of the number of people that want to be here in Dubbo. So we said to our CEO and our staff, accelerate the planning processes, accelerate what's happening with the Northwest Precinct. You've got a number of different land holders in there, including council. Huge opportunity for that great, huge parcel of land there. Let's go for it. And normally to take a big blank parcel of land, in fact one owned by multiple owners, and get to the stage where you're ready to actually start building houses, that's not a 5-minute process. It's years and years of planning, and not just from a Dubbo Regional Council perspective, but there's certain steps with the state government, and there's a whole range of things to go through. But we had our first DA come to council for a subdivision in that northwest precinct. And that was significant, and maybe the significance is lost potentially on lots of people because it just seems like, you're doing some planning over there and then now you're doing a DA for a subdivision.
That's how quickly it's moved through.
It's how quick. It's been a very quick process and something that we as councillors and our staff can be very proud of.
Absolutely.
Because we said we want to accelerate that.
Yep.
We actually received $9.23 million in an accelerated infrastructure fund from the state government to help accelerate part of that in terms of some of our infrastructure there. Yep. So we have worked on making this happen, doing it right, making it a different significant area, but also doing it quickly. And the first subdivision, 145 lots, which is only small in the whole scheme of things, but there's 145 lots that have now been approved.
So is the first block, like you talk about, a first DA sort of happening for that area? What are we talking about? The next 6 months, the first one's going to be started to operate, or 3 months, or what are we looking at as a time
Put me
frame?
on the spot now.
Hey?
The problem. So now, fantastic. We've now formally we've approved that subdivision. So there now is a developer that's got 145 lot subdivision on paper, approved, ready to go. He's now got to go and put the pipes in the ground and build that subdivision.
Yep.
How long does that take? You're probably right. Probably 6 months is probably the sort of time frame, but there's so many variables in there, it's hard to say. But when will the first house be on there? I'd like to think that we'll see the first house built in that northwest precinct or started being built by the end of next year.
Wow.
Which from the time it all started to end of 2025, say, that's fantastic. Now, again, this is the first subdivision. There's lots more that will happen and a lot of activity happen there.
It's this precinct, isn't it? Like
it's a huge area.
Yeah,
that's right. It's exactly right. It's a huge area, but it's starting in a timely fashion. And it is a bit different, that whole planning with different densities in there and trying to address the different needs people have. Gone are the days that you'll have a quarter acre block or a 1,200 square metre block and you put your 300, 400 square metre house on there and you've got your yard that you mow every Saturday morning. I mean, that still happens and can happen, but a variety of housing is a crucial part here.
Must be a great sense of synergy, though, the fact that you've you started this at the start of the term and 3 and a bit years later, here you are.
Well, less than that, 2 years. Well,
of course it is.
This term's only about 2 years and 9 months.
That's right. Even better still.
Very short time frame, and to get all that done in that time frame is impressive.
Oh, well done. All right. The renaming of the Legacy Shared Pathway. This was one of the decisions there that had to be finalised there at the meeting there last week. So, Mark Barnes, we go with that. That was the final call, was it?
You'd be amazed at how much discussion there was about the Mark Barnes pathway. Was it the pathway? Was it going to be the tag?
Well, it was called the Golden Pathway.
Mark Barnes'
We're going to
Golden
sort of get
Pathway.
a bit of gold rimming up on the side there.
Yeah.
And the statue was the big thing I think they were working on. That was the main call.
Stage 2, I thought that was.
That's true. That's right, yeah. Bronze embroidered or something.
I won't tell you exactly how much time was spent discussing the Mark Barnes name.
Hours, I'm thinking. Is that right?
I'm not going to say anything.
Because everyone just want to go, yes.
To protect the guilty, I'm not going to say anything about the amount of time spent discussing it. But it's a bit of an anticlimax.
Oh.
Because we...
So my mail is wrong. I didn't get through. Okay, right. There's some people going to be spoken to after this.
The submissions came in and we looked through those submissions and we were overwhelmed with submissions for Tracker Riley.
Yeah, okay.
As the name.
Yep. So sort of continue it on.
That's right. So again, some people have said to me, well, did you waste a bunch of time and effort and money going out there and basically coming back with the name that it was already going to be anyway, or he was part of that. But it was called Legacy Shared Pathway because that's the project that funded it, which seemed a bit silly. And there's a sign up there that says Legacy Shared Pathway because the state government gave us money, and obviously when you get money for different things, governments, both state and federal, like to put up signs to say there was some state government money spent on this. Yes. So there's a sign there at the moment that says Legacy Shared Pathway, and that seemed a bit of a strange name there. So it was a good idea to bring it forward, but I find it hard to be critical of council for going and asking the community what they thought about something.
Absolutely.
And
nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
It's not a huge
part of the role.
That's right. It's not a huge cost to council, to the community to go and ask those questions. But gee, I'd rather the questions were asked and we got some feedback rather than just say, we know everything. We are the masters of everything and we'll just go and name it whatever we like. For example, the Mark Barnes Promenade. So,
well, you represent the people. You're not are the people. You know what I mean? Like
correct.
It's one of those sort of things whereby, yes, you are the voice of the people in that sense. So therefore, to hear the voice of the people, you're the spoken representative of that. So it's a great idea. Yeah.
Now, the other thing that we did change, though, so it's just part of the whole Tracker Riley pathway, but the provider road, so the maintained provider road that goes in there, will be named the Tracker-Riley Promenade.
Oh, okay.
So that will actually have an official name, whereas in the past it didn't have any name. There was nothing gazetted there. So that name, the Tracker-Riley Promenade, will be basically notified to government authorities and will also be gazetted. Now, we don't get
Is
to
this
gazette
a little part of the road that would eventually go up to like a bit of the staging area is part of the staging?
The road
stage
that comes
2
in,
or something, isn't it?
Yeah, the road that comes in off the major
main
road
road
that
there.
goes under there. So
Yep.
essentially there was a change out of it. So we did get some feedback and we did say, okay, well, Tracker-Riley seems to be right, so let's call it Tracker-Riley Promenade. So that will be a change. And again, we don't make the decision to gazette, but we'll make an application to have that gazetted as the official name. And that probably is good from an emergency services perspective as well. If you're down there doing one of your 30-kilometre runs that you do on a daily basis.
Regularly, absolutely.
That's right. And then you happen to just get into trouble around that area, then at least emergency services would know where to go.
Yeah,
so if you're going to have something go wrong, make it go wrong there after it's gazetted so people know where to find you.
Well, it looks like I have to keep on waiting then for my bronze statue to be built there somewhere. Community event funding. Looks as though there's been some discussion there at the meeting in regards to where some community event funding is going to happen. Now, of course, this is one of 3 lots of funding that Council now gives out in regards to different types of funding assessments. So the first one, community event funds. How much money was given out in this section, Matt?
Well, I'll run through a few of the actual individual applications, and we did add one. Now, you've heard me talk before about Parkinson's law of triviality.
Yes, I do like this one.
Absolutely, it applied in this particular scenario. And Parkinson's law of triviality says that any committee discussion involving dollars, the length of time discussion or the length of the discussion time is inversely proportional to the amount of dollars being spent. Now, in this one of the councillors suggested that we add $500 to go to the Orana K9 Training Obedience. So I'll get the exact name here. The Orana K9 Training Club Dog Obedience Trials.
So this was on top of what was the allocated amount of funding?
Correct. So this is adding to it and not taking away from one of the other ones, adding to it.
Right.
So there was a fair bit of discussion and debate around that $500.
Yeah, right, okay.
We might have spent millions of dollars elsewhere in the...
But the hornet's nest got poked with this one, did it?
That's right, a little bit. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad a discussion, but it certainly was more discussion than other items on the agenda that we were having a lot more zeros in there. So the Teej Festival, that's from the Dubbo Nepalese community, got $800. Under Western Skies, that's from the Songwriters and Original Musicians Association Dubbo, got $3,000. Dubbo Multicultural Event, $2,000. The Geary Lions Christmas Carols got $100. And you think we seem a bit stingy, giving them only $100. That's what they asked for.
Is that right?
So applications come in and people ask for different amounts, but they've got
all
to
they want was $100.
They want $100, and we said, okay. The Holy Festival of Colours, Holy Holi, that's from the Orana Residents of Indian Subcontinental Heritage. They got $1,500. The Man from Ironbark Festival got $2,000, and as I mentioned, the $500 for the Orana K9. So when you look at all those, that's all the Community Events Fund. This is one of 3. Now, you've heard me talk about it before. That
Because they'll split this now, isn't it? This funding's into 3 different areas.
well, we've reduced it by 1, but we've got to, in my opinion, we've got to reduce it by a couple more and just have one big pool that you can apply for.
Is this now a decision now that the next council will have to make?
Definitely. There's a bit of planning and processing to go through that. So we've reduced it from 4 to 3. I just think we should get from 3 to 1, not reduce the dollars.
No.
Just bundle it up into 1. So do you want me to go through the Destination Events Fund?
Yeah, so this is a different one again.
There's a different little bucket here.
Yes.
The Destination Events Fund, we gave the Wellington Boot $5,000, the Stock Group Music Festival $5,000, the Dubbo of Stedford $5,000, Dubbo Winter Whisky Festival $3,000, the Cross Cultural Carnival $2,000, and Dubbo Motorfest got $5,000.
So there's obviously more money was given out in that area of funding than as the first group.
Yeah. And this is part of the complication.
This is part of the complication, isn't it? Exactly right. Is the fact that what's to say that the first group doesn't deserve the opportunity to have the same level of funding as the second group? You know what I mean? Like it's should all groups be given that same opportunity to access that same level of funding?
And what we've found in the past is sometimes you'll have one bucket oversubscribed and another bucket undersubscribed.
Yep.
But because they're council resolutions that dictate those amounts of money, it's not just, we'll just take it from that to that. We could resolve to do that, and sometimes we have resolved to move them from one to another, but it just seems to make it overly complicated.
Oz, is it classic example here for you, Matt. I was in conversation the other day with the Dubbo Stampede Committee. I'm involved with helping out those guys for this year, next weekend, just doing a little job for them. And I was chatting to them there about it, and they went to look towards accessing some of the funding available. And, of course, they would be a fabulous group, of course, to access. They'd fall into these categories. Now, the biggest problem they found was that in trying to work out which category to apply for, in the sense they're going, well, there's all these three different categories. We don't really fit into this category. Maybe we should go in that category. Is this going to be the right way to go? In the end, it became too complicated. It really probably did. And so this is one of the things, the reason why I'm hoping the next council turns around and says, look, guys, here's the level of funding. These are the different criterias from the point of view of must try to meet. If you meet these levels of criteria, let us know how much you want and we'll make a decision as to how much you're going to get. Like it seems pretty simple to me.
I think you're right. It does make a lot of sense. So hopefully that's what the next council in their wisdom will do. But again, at this stage, we've got the rules in place. So we've got
that's right. We only go by what's sort of governed by. I mean, what about the third group?
So the third one, and this is the Community Services Fund. So in this one, we go to the Dubbo Show Society, $42,790.
Wow. Is that a normal sort of figure you give to those guys?
Well, the Dubbo Show Society...
It's a big thing.
That's right. One of the things that was introduced many councils ago, and I remember the discussion, was sometimes you'd get different groups who would say, oh, we're doing this really good thing for the community. Can you not charge us for the use of this community asset? And council would often say, yep, sure thing. It's unfair to charge you for that, so we won't charge you, and that's it. Now, there was, again, a former mayor. I remember being on council at the time, and a former mayor said, well, it makes it hard for the staff member of this particular area. Make sure you're doing the best job you possibly can to keep your area, your facility in the black when council comes along and says, hey, waive those fees, will you? So the idea was talked about at that stage when we finally implemented it, where no, don't just, at no stage should you just go and waive the fees for any group. If we're going to do something for a group, you still charge those fees, and then as a separate decision, council might give that group some money, and so you can still
pay those fees.
That's right.
Yep.
You can still balance your bottom line, but in terms of that community group still being looked after, we can still look after them. So it just made it a bit clearer, more transparent, and also it made it obvious how much it was. So rather than just, oh, we just didn't charge them, how much would you normally have charged them? Oh, I don't know, we just gave it to them for free. Well, was that a $500 benefit or a $10,000 benefit?
Yeah.
So the show
From
society...
the P&L side of things, a lot easier to sort of work out than your costings.
Yeah, and it does. Some people do say to me, oh, it looks a bit silly. You give us $5,000 here and charge us $5,000 there. But I think it just does make it a bit cleaner and a bit more obvious what's happening. So for the show society, the amount that we gave them, the $42,000 we gave them, then they've got a large chunk of area they use and they manage that very well. And I don't have this as a fact, but I'm going, this is a bit of a gut feel. I reckon many, many, many years ago, it was probably, you just run that and we won't charge you anything for it. But we do charge them for it now, and then obviously the way we balance that is to give them some money.
Okay.
Yeah. So it does stand out as a large amount though, doesn't it?
It does.
That's right. Dubbo Melanoma March Group got $5,000. Western Region Academy of Sport, $3,523. Orana Education and Training Co-op, $6,000. Orascon, $2,500. Radri Wellington Aboriginal Town Common, $2,081.60. U3A Dubbo Chapter, $5,000. And Dubbo District Can Assist got $15,000.
Yeah, right.
So again,
there's some great levels of funding available there. Is any of this money coming through from any other assistance, or is this straight from local government funds?
These are our funds. So these aren't, for example, any community benefits funds from any renewables. So
it's all separate again. Okay.
Yeah. So we know that the Badangra Community Benefit Fund, for example, we give out money with that. That's separate to these ones. These ones are all council ones. But what I love about them is seeing what they do in the community. And I know when I get to hand out those checks, it'll be one of those things that I'll put them on the spot. I'll ask them what they're doing with it. And I love hearing those stories, and I'm sure we'll report those stories. So this money is separate from the Energy Co-funding that was announced there a couple of weeks ago? Correct, yeah. So lots of different buckets of money out there. You just got to know how to try and access them. That's right, absolutely. There's a good message there for everybody in the community. All right. Now, I'll read this little one out here in regards to it. During the meeting, the CEO will submit an application for the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone Community Employment Benefit Program. The reason why I have to read that is because it's fairly long. And the priority project will be the Renewable Energy Awareness and Career Training Centre, subject to a positive and supportive feasibility study of 11.25 million. This is the RES, not the RES, the REACT Centre. Is that right? The REACT Centre, yes. So very exciting, and it's happening quicker than I ever expected. Sometimes you'll come up with these ideas and talk about them, and several years later you might get a bit of traction, and then 10 years later something happens with it. We've been talking about this for a little while, and we've been putting some things together. You've heard me talk about it before, that we put together a basic business case. We started distributing that around. I've given it to Chris Bowen, I've given it to Twiggy Forrest, I've given it to Penny Sharp, spread it around with different proponents. And on the back of some of those discussions, we got 4 different proponents, gave us $50,000 each, so $200,000 to do a more advanced feasibility study. So we're in the process of doing that.
Yep.
But then, as you know, Penny Sharp was in town recently and announced that first tranche of $70 million of the $128.4 million to start being distributed out. Now, that's not all for us. That's spread amongst 4 council areas and council groups and different community groups and councils, etc. But of that, we've got the first part of that funding is $11.25 million for council to make an application for.
Yep.
Now, what they really want from that is things that make a long-term economic difference. They don't want things where they say, great, for the next 5 years, no one has to buy a new soccer shirt for their kids at playing soccer because you've now got this fund paying for those soccer shirts. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. Cost of living pressure reduces that for those parents for those 5 years, but it doesn't really make a huge economic difference in the community out of kids getting new soccer shirts.
Something that can be long-term.
Correct. That's right.
Something that in 25, 30 years' time, that is still going and becoming something that people are drawn to as a tourist attraction.
Yeah, yep. Now, I am biased because it's our council that's come up with this idea with the React Centre. Yep. We've been working on this, so I am biased. I take what I say with a slight grain of salt, but I haven't seen a better idea than this to fundamentally change the economy of Wellington. And I say that as something that is a pretty big statement, but I think this has got the legs to make it an absolutely true statement.
And Penny Sharp's aware of it.
Well, Penny Sharp, in fact, one of her advisors, so it didn't come from Penny's mouth herself, but one of her advisors, when he asked me to speak at the launch of the $70 million, said, could you mention something like the React Centre in that as a type of project? And so I cheekily said, do you want me to make the announcement that you're funding that?
And you're going to hand me the check right now?
And he backpedaled very quickly. He said, no. Can you just mention that as a type of project that could be funded by this? So at the announcement of that $70 million, Penny spoke. The only project that was spoken about was when I spoke about the potential for something like the React Centre. So it was significant, and they knew I was going to talk about it. It didn't come as a surprise to them. So that, in terms of a project, obviously they've got to go through a process to approve money. You can't just say, oh, Penny said so. So that will still happen. My only concern when this went to the council meeting on Thursday was that it's happened so quickly that we actually haven't finished the feasibility study.
Yeah, okay.
Now, we've got to have the application in by the 9th of September. So again, this was meant to be the last council meeting, so it was brought into these business papers, and it was discussed about how do we do it in such a way that the feasibility's still got to stack up. We don't want to be making an application for $11.25 million. That's right. Now, and that's where you've got those words that put the application in. So we've instructed the CEO to put the application in subject to a positive and supportive feasibility study. So if the feasibility study comes back and says, no, this is a complete waste of time, it's not going to work, you're not getting any visitors, it's too expensive, then don't put the application in, and we'll have to try and come up with something very quickly to put the application in for.
The state government's happy with that?
Well, the state government will be happy with...
From the point of view of, the fact you're putting it in without, with this little proviso on it?
The whole point will be that we won't put it in until we get that back.
Oh, until you get... Okay, right.
So the 9th of September is when the applications have to be in by. So
to the state government?
To the state government.
Yeah.
We should expect to see our feasibility study back early days of September.
Okay, so we should get it back before then. If everything's good to go...
And that's where we've given the CEO the ability to submit it, subject to...
So he's got the ability then to kibosh that if he
comes back and says this is rubbish,
already stated for it.
Yep,
okay, right.
Don't do it, and we need to come up with something else very quickly then.
Yeah, good.
But it is exciting, and if it does take up the way I hope it does take up, I've met with the consultants. I'm certainly not directing the consultants what to do, but I've met with them and told them what I think it looks like, but they've met with lots of people to say what they think it should look like. Yeah. But that would be exciting. And again, I just can't get past how much this would change Wellington forever. Not just for a couple of years, but forever. Right. Yep. And that's something that I think this council can look back on and go, wow, this council's a part of something really special.
We've talked about it, the fact that down there in Parks, you've got the Parks Telescope. Who would ever thought that would be such a major tourist attraction in its own right?
All these years later.
That's
right.
So you finished up there with the council meeting. You then decided that you might have a little dash down to Adelaide Hey?
It did feel like that, actually.
Hey, what's the attraction of Adelaide? Nice city, of course, but
It is a nice city.
what drew you to Adelaide?
Well, in this case, the Australian Local Government Association invited me along to
Right.
speak at their National Local Government Housing Summit. And as you imagine,
Very timely.
yeah, I get lots of invitations from lots of organisations to go and speak at various things, and I can't make it to most of them. But when it's the Australian Local Government Association, I've got a lot of respect and time for the organisation. Linda Scott's the president at the moment. She's retiring as president, but she's done a great job as the president of that organisation. So I wanted to try and make it there if I could. And again, council meeting Thursday night, I said, look, the best I can do is fly over Friday morning. They organised the tickets for me. Actually, we had a bit of fun with the tickets because often these different groups where I go and fly and speak at their various events, they'll often pay for tickets or accommodation or whatever. I don't get paid for them. That's part of my role as mayor, so I'm not getting any personal payment out of it. And I guarantee it's not a junket because it's usually...
Well, it's always the first thing sort of gets rolled around, these sort of things.
It's a lot of, like, again, finish the council meeting. I probably didn't get back from the council meeting by the time we'd had some dinner and patted everyone on the back on Thursday night. Maybe I got home at 10 o'clock or thereabouts, and so finish a bit of work off, jump up the next morning, catch the 6:30 flight down, catch the flight across to Adelaide then jump in a cab and get into the conference centre, work out what's happening and the lay of the land, and then go and do your talk, and then so it's all pretty hectic and active, and then back on a flight Saturday morning because they'd be back in Dubbo on
So for
Saturday.
anybody out there sort of thinking, think a guest speaker. You're a guest speaker. You've invited to a function as a guest speaker. They're paying your way for it, like any guest speaker does. Gets situation. You're in there, you do your job, and you're out of there.
Well,
in this situation, you actually get paid for it. You do it as a voluntary base as well.
That's right. Well, I'm still paid as mayor. So I don't
You're the cheapest guest speaker in Australia.
That's right. I don't say it's volunteering, so I don't want to think people are some mart of volunteering.
No,
but
it's
certainly,
because you get paid as the mayor, but that's how I get to.
Yeah, that's right. I think it would be, I'd have to return my wage for that day, if you like, if I got paid to do these. But I feel like I'm representing Dubbo, but also contributing to the wider discourse in whatever area people invite me to come along and speak about these things.
Did they particularly pick you, Matt, because of what's going on here right now and after the announcement there that was made by state government with the 3D housing and with the Housing Commission?
A whole range of reasons there. And obviously they've got a number of speakers in different areas during the day. So that's certainly an important part of it. Why they pick people, how they pick people, I'm not really sure why they do it in every situation. But when they spoke to me previously, they said, what we'd like you to talk about is some of the successes you're having. And that involved a range of things. So I did talk about, for example, the Northwest Precinct, how you can accelerate that planning because we need more housing. So I went through a bit of that in detail. I also spoke about the 10 hectares of land that we've leased out because one of the things, and again, when you go to these conferences, not only are you speaking at them, but you can sit in and listen. So I heard some other speakers as well. And one of the big key terms I've heard, not just at this conference, but I've heard for a little while now, is enabling infrastructure. And that's a sexy way of saying we want someone
get things built.
Well, we want someone to pay for pipes in the ground.
Oh, okay,
that's the enabling infrastructure is what the key term is that I hear over and over now. And so when I spoke about the 10 hectares of land we're leasing to a proponent, and they're going to put the enabling infrastructure in, the pipes in the ground, they're going to use it in the short term, and then we get it long term. That was pretty exciting for them. When I spoke about the advanced wastewater treatment, where we've got a proponent to pay for...
The shared partnership sort of agreement there.
Yeah, that PPP. Yeah. When I talked about that, and so this is all about housing, how we accelerate housing, but you need water. If you build more houses, you need
that's the
to be able to
infrastructure
water.
part, isn't it? Yeah.
So that's some of that infrastructure. So I spoke about that and that process. And of course, yes, I did speak about 3D printing and talked about the process we went through with that, the toilet, and with the obviously social housing announcement by the Honourable Rose Jackson, the Minister for Housing in New South Wales. So spoke about that. And this was an audience from across the nation, but I would have said it would have been at least half from South Australia. Right. So they're probably not up to date with what the New South Wales Minister for Housing is announcing. So some of them hadn't heard much about the Minister's announcement. They'd actually, many of them had heard about the 3D printing project here in Dubbo, the toilet. So that was something that was familiar to them.
Okay.
But what was fascinating, and it does make you laugh sometimes when you do various things. So as I was going through talking about some of these different things, and audiences react different ways. If you say something interesting, amusing, whatever, they'll react, they'll laugh, they'll clap, whatever. Yeah. But when I went through and gave the detail about the 3D process and then the announcement last week, when I said that it was a pretty gratifying situation for all councillors, and I did mention that I sent all councillors an email to say congratulations and said the announcement that the Minister had made, the audience broke out into spontaneous applause.
Isn't that right? That's
just
right, isn't it? Yeah.
Because they realised that at a council level,
you're changing state government ways they do policy and way they do things.
That's right. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a big thing.
It's an audience of local government people across the nation. So they realised that for that to happen, that was pretty significant. And then the questions afterwards, and it made me laugh, a couple of questions afterwards. So a couple of people asked questions from the audience. They were pretty fascinated about the 3D process and want to know just about the enabling infrastructure with the proponent, with the renewable energy proponent. So a few little questions around those areas. But when I finished and walked away afterwards, a couple of people came over to talk to me, which often happens, and someone said, so those toilets, we've got some new toilets we've got to put into our LGA. How much did you pay for them? I said, approximately $316,000. I said, wow, that's pretty good value for money. And what do you get for that? And I mentioned the various cubicles, and they said, that is great value for money. Have you got a card? And I want to find out who did that job for you. I said, well, we just put it out to tender. We went to open tender. And so if you go to open tender, you'll find someone, but I'll give you my card and we can give you details and all the rest of it. But just go to open tender. I guarantee there are companies out there. Yeah. We went to open tender and we just chose the best of those ones that came in. Yeah. But do the same thing, and I guarantee you'll find ones out there. Yeah. But it made me chuckle because sometimes people are questioning the value of those toilets there, and here you've got a local government audience going, wow, that was fantastic value there.
That's the thing, and we've talked about this before in regards to, we mentioned it a few weeks ago about the first one through the brick wall gets hurt the most, and and certainly I think that's been the case here. But we see the fact, though, once you're through the wall, there's the others on the outside sitting there going, great, we want to know. We'll follow you through because this is a really exciting project. And I think anything that is new, there's always going to be teething problems. There's always going to be this, there's going to be that. People are going to question, but the reality is things only get better from here. That's the exciting part, I think, about this, is who knows where this will go. And the fact that we were brave enough to be the first ones to actually do this, it is a massive credit to the council, to the point of view of simply saying, let's be brave to go through this. Yeah, we're going to take some whacks for this, but who knows where this could lead, and we're going to be the first group to do it.
One of the other speakers that I listened to on the day was someone from a very small council. Their total turnover was about $9 million. So compared to us, if you just based it on dollars value only, it's about 1/20th the size of the regional council. Yeah. And they said one of the issues they had was not enough housing, but developers weren't interested in their LGA because it was too small. So they were really having trouble getting any new development. And so it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. No one was coming to their town because, you have no housing. You have no housing because no one wants to come to your town. So where do you go? So they said, we made a decision as a council to spend $1 million on buying and developing some real estate, some land.
Right, yeah.
And they said, you can imagine.
It's big for them.
That's a huge amount. And when you look at that, 1/9 of your annual budget you're spending on developing some land, not the housing, this is just the land. Yeah. And so they said, we did it and we copped a fair bit in the community for it, but we started selling blocks. We had some new people coming to town. After we did all this, we've made money, not ridiculous amounts of money, but we've made money on the $1 million, much better money than if we had just left it sitting in our investments or not borrowing the money. I'm not sure which way they sourced the money. Yeah. But essentially, after that process, it was absolutely vindicated, the fact that they went through this process, but it took some brave councillors to make that decision to actually invest that much money in the future of their community. That's what they were doing, but they copped it in the neck a bit for a while there until finally at the end of it people went, now I'm sure the same as many areas, no one came up to them afterwards and said, gee, I criticised you heavily for that, but now, well done. But the results they've gotten out of that have absolutely proven that it was the right decision for them.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, last Saturday too, you had a bit of a chance there to catch up with a couple of guys after you flew back in from Adelaide, and two blokes, Ed and Seb. Now, I don't know too much about Ed and Seb, but had a chance to catch up because they were doing what they call their big walk for little kids. I love this. This is a big one because I'll let you sort of tell all the details, but I just love the idea when a couple of people come up with an idea, and you love this sort of stuff as well. You know it when little idea starts from probably a little small seed and sort of suddenly it becomes big and massive, and they're in the middle of it and doing this, and they're raising money here for a terrific cause in regards to the Camp Quality Group. So talk us through it. Who are these two blokes and what are they doing? Because I think it's pretty remarkable, honestly.
Well, it's not a big walk they're doing. It's called Ed's Big Walk
It's a huge walk.
for little
It
kids.
should be, excuse me, it's a bloody big walk.
So they're walking from Brisbane to Melbourne.
That's huge.
Now, I did say, I know Rex has gone broke. Or, sorry, Rex has pulled out. I shouldn't say that. I'll retract that statement. Rex hasn't gone broke.
That's right.
Rex has withdrawn from the major capital city markets. I understand you might have some tickets on Rex, but you could probably find some other tickets to go from Brisbane to Melbourne if you wanted
That's right.
to.
There's other ways of doing it. But
Other ways to do it. They did
What's that,
talk
about 2,500 Ks or something, is it?
2,643 because they're not going the direct route as well. If you're going to do it, you'd do it the most direct route, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, of course, these guys obviously going through little towns along the way.
They want to go through various locations along the way, including Dubbo, obviously.
Yeah.
So I did hear about the lack of toenails they have on their shoes. They're doing about 50 kilometres a day.
Yeah, right.
Obviously walking, not running.
Yep.
But think about a marathon. Think about running a marathon, 42 kilometres, obviously. But you think about that and just think, okay, more than a marathon every day. Now, it's not going to be as hard on your body when you're not running it, but still just walking it, and they walk along at a reasonable pace because you obviously don't want to be out on the road all day, but walking along, they've lost toenails. They were sponsored by a footwear company, and so they've
Appropriate.
They've
well
got
done.
Hoka,
Well done.
H-O-K-A, Hoka's the footwear company, so a
yes.
well-known footwear company,
Yep.
and they said they estimated that they'd need about 5 pairs of shoes each. So
Is that right?
that's what they were given by Hoka. Here's 5 pairs of shoes for each of
Awesome.
you. So they've got good shoes, and they're replacing those shoes regularly, but still losing toenails. One of the guys, Seb, said that his knee, one of his knees, was just about due for replacement anyway. It sounds like a set of tyres on a car, doesn't it?
Oh, my God.
He said his knee was a bit chonky
Let's do
before
one
it
last
started.
run around the Australia on it almost, it feels like. My
Well, his
goodness.
medical advice was, well, you need a new replacement, or need a replacement knee anyway. So you go and walk that. It's not going to make it much worse. It might make it a bit worse, but you're going to have it done anyway.
That's it.
So he's doing this before he goes and does that. But he'll have a great story to tell in hospital. Oh, what happened to you? Oh, I walked 2,643 kilometres.
Yeah,
now I got a
yeah,
new knee.
And a new one.
So again, they're just two guys, older guys, that have just said we're going to do some serious fundraising and awareness for Camp Quality. So that's exactly what they're doing. And so I'll give the website. I don't often do this, but having chatted to them on Saturday, I literally flew back in, went straight to meet up with them because I told them I was coming from Adelaide, and they seem like the two friends. I don't know how long they knew each other for, but two friends. They've got a support crew with
Obviously, going
them.
to spend a bit of time together. They're probably quite friendly at the end of it, or probably hate each other, one of the two.
You hope you'd be friends at the end of it anyway.
That's right.
But edsbigimpact.au, so EDS, edsbigimpact.au. There's no .com or anything there missing there, so just .au. Go there and have a look at it. It gives you lots more information there. But again, I just think there's great people out there. These aren't Dubbo people, of course, but great people out there in the community doing some great work, and I'm glad they came through Dubbo.
Absolutely. And the fact is, of course, that Camp Quality, and it is one of those sort of things whereby it's a club which nobody wants to be a member of, because obviously to go to Camp Quality, there's reasons why your families would be in that, and the kids would go there. And there's kids from Dubbo who obviously gone to Camp Quality as a family on a personal level. We've used Camp Quality a number of times with my daughter many years ago when she went through her own personal cancer battle, and it is a fabulous organisation, a well-run organisation, benefit everybody around Australia and those families who struggle and assist their way through that. So well done to both these two guys, and if you can, donate a couple of bucks. Now, speaking of donating a couple of bucks, there's another bloke that I know is actually going to do a little bit of fundraising for a good cause, and you're going to go into jail for it too, and I'm talking about you. Because coming up, you're going to do the sleep out, aren't you? But of course, you're going to be put in jail because you're going to the Old Dubbo jail as part of the sleep out. But there's a bit of fundraising idea for this that you're getting involved with, mate. So well done. Tell us about what the cause is and what's happening.
Two separate issues here. So
Two separate issues.
Two separate things. Sleep out, that's the Vinnie sleep out happening at the end of August. But this is another one where they're locking me up and I've got to raise money to get let out.
Oh, so this is separate to the
Vinnie sleep out.
look at you go.
Yeah,
so they lock you up twice.
So there's a next
Might be a
Thursday.
few people out there sort of go, it's about time.
That's exactly
They're
right.
probably more than happy to sort of donate a couple of bucks to you for that.
Well, some people have said how much does it cost to keep you in jail.
Yes, there you go. So, yeah. So all those people out there, you want to sort of keep him there, $100 bucks.
Maybe I offer
Make it
something
1,000.
to get it to a certain amount to keep me in there for a bit longer.
That's
so
right.
this is on the 22nd of August. They're going to come and arrest me and lock me up. I've done it before, and it's good fun because they take it pretty seriously. You'll get some cops turn up or some
Come to the door
law
here.
enforcement, and they'll knock on the door.
I can just imagine it now. There'll be some people out there with the videos.
That's
sort of,
right.
Put
some
posted
cuffs
online.
on.
There it is. There. Finally got him. He's away now.
That's right. Off you go. They put you in a cell at Old Dubbo Jail, and then you've got a phone, and you can go through and start making calls to people to say, please donate some money. And if you look on my Facebook page now, I've actually got my wanted poster up already. They did a wanted poster for me.
Yes.
They've actually come up with a crime. The crime that I'm being charged with is a conspiracy to excessively promote Dubbo. So there's my official crime. I've got my inmate number. And there is a QR code there on the...
Do you wear the little striped shirts? Or what about they have little shirts that, don't know, striped? They had little weird little insignia on sort of thing, didn't they? The old convict shirts.
They did. I'm just hoping they're not giving me a strip search on the way in. Hopefully that's not part of the program. So I would encourage people to help get me out. I do have a busy day next Thursday, so I have committed to going in. I said I'm hoping I'm going to take no more than an hour to get enough money, raise enough money to get out.
So is there a figure that you have to reach?
There was last time, and I can't remember what it was last time. They haven't mentioned a figure this time. It's just as much as possible, but I'll probably have some sort of target there on the day. But at this stage, all I know is sometime Thursday morning, they come and grab me, throw me in there, and here's your phone, go for it.
So if someone wants to donate for this to either to keep you in there or to get you out.
And this is all focused around youth homelessness. So trying to help
So it's a bit of a similarity to the Sleep Out later
It is,
on as well.
So Orana Support Services, Tina Reynolds is
nice.
organising all
Good
this.
on her.
So Tina was very quick to ring me and say, Matt, finally, I want to put you in jail. So
for a good cause, there it is.
That's right. So on my Facebook page, if you go to any of my social media, I've already put up that wanted poster. I'll post some more things on Thursday as well when I'll be saying, please go and donate now, help raise some money for me to get me out of jail. And I suppose one of those things that I think the more you can do to help, whether it's Ed's Big Walk or whether it's with homelessness services around Dubbo, then please donate.
I can't wait to talk about this next week.
Thank you.
Well, mate, we've come to the end of the podcast, which means, of course, it's time for the Limerick of the Week. All righty, hit me with it. What have you got this week?
Well, I'm torn.
Are you?
There are so many different interesting things that have occurred over the last week. It does seem to get to the point where I need to write a limerick for each story almost. And I actually almost did that with, I did talk about my fellow councillors, and I've posted this on my Facebook page as well, where I just talk about each councillor for maybe 40 or 50 seconds just to give a quick summary of what I saw they contributed over the term of council. And when I was doing that, I actually thought I should write a limerick on each councillor. But I didn't know whether it just seemed a bit trivial, whether I was downplaying the importance. I want to make it a bit more serious than that. So I didn't do that in the end. But in this, I get to the point where I go, I could write a limerick on that story. I could write a limerick on that story. So I'm going to let you decide.
Oh, right.
I've got a number
You're
of
going to
limericks.
put me on the spot, are you?
I'd like to say I'd do it off the cuff, but I've got a number of limericks here ready to go.
Have you now?
And on a few different topics, but I'm going to let you pick the best topic there from the topics we talked about today.
All right.
Hopefully it's one that I've got a
you want to hope so, that's right. Well, I was thinking the legacy share pathway, because you've got the decision on that. But having heard then what you just sort of said just then, I think a more appropriate one would be to write a limerick reflecting on your councillors that you work with over the last 3 years.
So you want me to wrap up...
A general one over those guys.
We're going to wrap up 9 councillors into one limerick.
That's my
wow.
plan.
So,
that's it. There we go.
You. And the thing I like about limerick is it's so
nice little challenge for you.
disciplined in terms of what you can do with it. But I thought you might go down that path, so I do happen to have one
Oh, did
here.
Oh, really? Oh, here we go.
On this council term, because it is significant. Though I think here we are at the...
Did you lead me then with that sort of, they do that sort of subliminal
Mind game.
limiting mind game thing there, pushing me to go that way?
No, I had 50 limericks written ready to go. But so here we go. This is a reflection on the council term and councillors on this council term. Here we go.
Rip it.
We tackled each challenge with pride, and the community stood by our side. Through meetings and plans, we helped better the lands, leaving such progress that none could deride.
Well, that actually is pretty impressive. I can't believe you actually had that sorted out there for me. There's some dead set mind game stuff happening. Wonderfully well done as always. Well, folks, that wraps us up for another one of our Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.